Welcome to Monk's Temple. Find a comfortable position, wherever you are. Let the weight of the day begin to settle. Perhaps close your eyes, or soften your gaze. We're not here for haste. We're here for understanding. For the next while, we will journey together not across land, but across the landscape of our own speech. The words we choose are like the air we breathe, constantly leaving us, entering the world, and becoming part of the atmosphere others live in. Tonight, we explore what Buddhism, in its profound compassion for the suffering of beings, gently asks us to let settle, and what it asks us to give voice to instead. This is not a lecture. Think of it as a long, quiet walk through a forest of wisdom, with many clearings where we can stop and rest with a story. Our guide on this walk is a principle as old as the hills, taught by the Buddha himself. That our speech carries immense power, the power to build palaces of connection or prisons of isolation. Let us begin this walk by sitting for a moment in silence, simply noticing the intention to listen, to understand. Pause for 5 seconds in delivery. I remember, many years ago, walking through a vast, ancient forest not far from a monastery where I was staying. The silence there was not an empty silence, but a full one. Filled with the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, the crunch of my own steps on the path. I came to a giant, fallen tree, its trunk wider than I was tall. It had clearly been struck by lightning. The force had not just felled it, it had split its heartwood open from crown to roots, rending it into 2 separate, splintered halves. I sat on the moss beside this majestic ruin for a long time. And it occurred to me, this is what our words can do. Not all words. But certain kinds of speech possess the volatile energy of that lightning. They don't just wound the surface, they aim for the heartwood of connection and split things asunder. In the teachings of the Buddha, there is a name for this kind of verbal lightning. It is called divisive speech. We will speak of this first, not because it is the most common, but because its effect is so visually stark, so final, like that split tree. Divisive speech is any word uttered with the intention, conscious or simmering beneath the surface, to separate. To create a crack where there was unity. To whisper, you are here, and they are there, and to build a wall in the space between. It is not merely gossip, though gossip is its most frequent vehicle. Gossip is often idle, a careless spillage. Divisive speech is gossip with a mission. It is the sentence that begins, don't tell him I told you, but. Or, I probably shouldn't say this, but since you're my friend. It is the art of sharing a secret not for the joy of intimacy, but for the subtle pleasure of being the gatekeeper of information, of drawing someone closer to you by pushing someone else further away. The Buddha taught us to abstain from this. Not as a rule, but as a protection. A protection for the peace of the community, and more intimately, for the peace of our own hearts. When we engage in divisive speech, we are not just describing a separation, we are actively cultivating the soil of our own mind for the seeds of suspicion and alienation to grow. We become architects of a divided world, and then we have to live in the cramped, fortified rooms we've built. Let me tell you an original story, a fable from the monk's temple. Once, in a valley between 2 great mountains, there was a village blessed with a single, crystalline spring. The water emerged from a rock face in a laughing cascade, filling a shared basin before flowing through channels to every home. It was the life of the village. For generations, no one owned it, everyone maintained it. Then, one season, the rains were light. The cascade became a trickle. The basin was no longer overflowing. A man from the east side of the basin looked at a man from the west side and thought, he is taking more than his share. His family is larger. He is greedy. He did not say this aloud to the other man. Instead, he went to his neighbor on the east side and said, quietly, have you noticed how the west sider's buckets are always full? Even now. The neighbor looked. From his angle, it did seem the west side buckets looked heavier. A seed was planted. The east side neighbor spoke to another. The west siders are hoarding. They must be diverting the stream at night. On the west side, similar whispers began. The east siders blame us for the drought. They think they own the spring. The words were like stones dropped into the shared basin. They did not create water, they only muddied what was there. Soon, children from the east were forbidden to play with children from the west. The communal cleaning of the spring channels ceased. Each side posted a guard at night, not against some external thief, but against each other. The drought of trust became more severe than the drought of rain. The water, sensing the tension in the hands that came to collect it, seemed to withdraw further into the earth. It took the village's oldest grandmother, who had stayed silent through the murmuring, to change the course. She did not chastise. She simply walked to the dry basin at noon, when both sides' guards were watching. She took not a bucket, but a cup. She knelt, scooped what little water pooled there, and drank. Then she spoke, not in a whisper, but in a clear, tired voice that carried. The water is not east. The water is not west. The water is thirsty. And so are we. Her words were not divisive, they were conjunctive. They reminded everyone of the shared basin, the shared thirst. Slowly, shamefaced, people put down their buckets and picked up their tools. They dug not separately, but together, upstream, to find the source of the blockage. They found it. A landslide of rocks and old roots, unnoticed, choking the spring's heart. It took everyone to clear it. The water returned, not because the rains came, but because the blockage of suspicion was removed. The Buddha's teaching on abstaining from divisive speech is that act of clearing the shared channel. It is recognizing that the real blockage is rarely out there, it is the internal landslide of us and them that our words can so easily trigger. Before we move deeper into this forest of speech, if these reflections resonate with you, if you feel this slow, deliberate unpacking of wisdom serves your life, consider subscribing to Monk's Temple. It is simply a way of whispering, yes, to this path of understanding. Your subscription is a gentle bell that rings in this digital space, letting us know you are here, walking this path with us. It allows us to continue creating these long-form explorations of peace. Now, let us continue. Divisive speech often wears the cloak of concern. I'm only telling you this because I care about you. But we must ask, does the telling build a bridge of care between you and the person you're speaking to, or does it burn a bridge between them and a third person? True care seeks to mend, not to sunder. The karma of this, as Buddhism teaches, is profound. We bind ourselves to the energy of separation. We may feel a fleeting sense of power or inclusion, but we have, in fact, imprisoned ourselves in a smaller world. The world of those who know the secret, the world of those who are against them. It is a confining world. Now, let us shift our gaze. We have seen the verbal lightning that splits. But what of the constant, slow drip of words that erodes? The drip that wears down stone, not by force, but by relentless, meaningless repetition. The Buddha gave a name to this as well. Idle chatter. We often think of idle chatter as harmless. It is the filler, the social lubricant, the weather talk. And in small measure, simple, friendly exchange is a beautiful part of human connection, a smile made audible. But the Buddha pointed to a deeper idleness. It is speech that is devoid of nutritive value. Speech that is not rooted in the present moment, in truth, in kindness, or in purpose. It is the compulsive narration of nothing. The recycling of rumors we know are untrue. The endless dissection of events that do not concern us and over which we have no influence. It is the mind's clutter, vocalized. Think of your attention as a clear, still pond. Every word you utter or ingest is a pebble tossed into that pond. A purposeful, kind word is a pebble placed gently, creating intentional, beautiful ripples. Idle chatter is like standing at the shore and mindlessly throwing handful after handful of gravel into the water. The surface is perpetually disturbed. You cannot see the depth. You cannot see the reflection of the sky. The pond becomes a chaotic, murky thing defined only by the constant, agitated impact. This is what we do to our own mental landscape. We rob ourselves of silence, of clarity, of the capacity to hear our own inner wisdom, which speaks in a whisper, not a shout. I recall a long train journey I took across a vast plain. In my compartment was a man who talked. He talked from the moment the train left the station. He commented on every passing field, speculated on the lives of every passenger who walked by, recounted in minute detail his mildly frustrating morning, predicted the political future, and dissected the sporting chances of teams I had never heard of. It was not conversation, it was a monologue to the universe. After 2 hours, I felt a profound fatigue, not physical, but spiritual. It was as if the air in the compartment had been replaced with a dense, buzzing fog of syllables. I politely excused myself and stood in the space between carriages, where the roar of the wheels and the rushing wind created a thunderous, wordless symphony. In that immense noise, I found a deeper silence than in the compartment filled with human speech. It was a silence of intention. The wind and wheels had no narrative, no opinion, no gossip. They simply were. I returned to my seat renewed. The man, bless him, had talked himself to sleep. The compartment was now peaceful. His idle chatter had been, I realized, a defense against silence, against the profound and sometimes uncomfortable intimacy of simply being with another person without filling the space. Buddhism invites us to find the courage to be comfortable in those quiet spaces. To let the pond of our mind settle. This doesn't mean we become grim, silent statues. It means we become discerning gardeners of our speech. We ask ourselves before we speak, is this useful? Is this true? Is this kind? Is this the right time? If the answer to any of these is no, especially the first, we have the option, the profound spiritual option, to offer the gift of our quiet presence instead. The gift of listening. For in the ecology of communication, listening is the fertile soil. Speech is the plant that grows from it. Without deep, patient soil, the plants will be shallow-rooted and weak, mere idle chatter. Let me share another original tale from the monk's temple annals. There was a renowned potter named Cow, whose jars were said to hold water cooler than ice and grain fresher than the day it was harvested. Artists and emperors sought his work. A young apprentice, desperate to learn his secret, followed his every move. He noted the exact clay Cow used, the temperature of his kiln, the glaze recipes. He mimicked every physical action perfectly. Yet, his pots were good, but ordinary. They cracked sooner. They did not have the same presence. In frustration, the apprentice finally confessed his failure. Cow smiled and said, "You have watched my hands, but you have not heard my silence." He invited the boy to sit with him, not in the workshop, but in the clay quarry at dawn. For 7 mornings, they sat without speaking, watching the mist rise from the raw earth. They listened to the birds, to the distant river, to the very silence of the land. On the 8th day, in the workshop, Cow did not just knead the clay. He seemed to listen to it. His movements were not just skilled, they were responsive, a dialogue between his intent and the material's nature. He explained, "The secret is not in the doing, but in the being with." The clay has a song of becoming. My chatter, my plans, my ego, they are like a loud voice shouting over that song. I must first sit in the quarry's silence until my inner noise settles. Then, in this quiet, I can hear the clay's whisper. My hands then become the voice that answers that whisper. A pot is not made, it is a conversation that has found a beautiful, permanent form. The apprentice understood. His mistake was filling the sacred space of creation with the idle chatter of his anxious mind, his ambition, his frantic copying. He learned to sit, to listen, and only then to let his speech, his shaping of the clay, emerge from that depth. Our words, too, should be like Cow's pots. Vessels formed not from the chatter of a restless mind, but from the deep, listening silence of a present heart. They will then hold meaning, preserve truth, and nourish those who receive them. This cultivation of silence as the bedrock of meaningful speech leads us directly to the opposite of idle chatter. Not to more talking, but to a specific, corrosive form of talk that is very much intentional. We move from the aimless drip to the deliberate blow. The Buddha called this harsh speech. Harsh speech is violence translated into sound. It is the word as weapon. Its intention is not to separate, as with divisive speech, but to diminish, to inflict pain, to dominate. It lives in insults, cruel jokes, sarcasm meant to wound, public shaming, yelling, and a cold, cutting tone that can make a simple question feel like a condemnation. We have all been on the receiving end. That hot flush of shame, the cold pit in the stomach, the feeling of being made small. We have also, if we are brutally honest with ourselves, been the source. Often, we dress it up as, just being honest, or, tough love. But the Buddha asks us to look at the root. Is the root compassion, or is it anger? Is it a desire for the other's growth, or a desire to vent our own frustration, to assert our superiority, to make our own pain felt by another? Imagine your mind as a castle. Within its walls are many rooms, peace, joy, patience, wisdom. But there is also a dungeon. In that dungeon, we chain the parts of ourselves we fear or dislike, our rage, our hurt, our feelings of powerlessness. Harsh speech is like storming out of that dungeon, throwing open the castle gate, and unleashing those chained demons onto the village outside. The villagers, the people we speak to, are terrorized by our imprisoned pain. We may feel a momentary release, but the demons are not gone. They have merely rampaged and will return to the dungeon, often stronger, awaiting the next key of provocation. The karma of harsh speech, in Buddhism, is that we become synonymous with the storm. People see our castle and fear the demons within. They build moats and walls to keep us out. We become isolated in our own fortress of anger. True strength, the Buddha taught, is not in the force of our outburst, but in the capacity to go into that dungeon within ourselves, not with a weapon, but with a lamp of mindful awareness. To sit with the rage, the hurt, the fear. To understand its origin. To offer it compassion inside the castle walls. When we do this, the need to unleash it verbally dissolves. Our speech can then come from the higher rooms of the castle, from the library of wisdom or the sunlit balcony of compassion. It may still be firm. It may still set boundaries. But it is not harsh. It does not seek to destroy, it seeks to protect or correct with a minimum of suffering. I remember a time, early in my years of study, when I was given the task of tending a small, walled garden with another novice. He was meticulous, passionate, but with a temper. I was slower, more contemplative, often lost in watching the insects and the way the light fell. One afternoon, I accidentally stepped on and crushed a rare seedling he had nurtured from seed. He turned, and his face contorted. The words that came out were a torrent. They weren't just about the plant, they were about my worth, my clumsiness, my lack of care, my entire approach to life. I stood there, feeling as crushed as the seedling. Later, our teacher found me weeding in silence, tears dripping into the soil. He didn't ask what happened. He simply said, "The harshest words are often a map of the speaker's own hidden wounds, drawn in the ink of another's mistake. Do not carry his map as your burden. But also, learn from the map. See where the landmarks of pain are, so you may tread more gently around them in others, and in yourself." That was a pivotal lesson. The harsh speech was not about me or the seedling. It was about my brother novice's dungeon. His fear of failure, his immense attachment to control, his identity being so tied to his perfect garden. My clumsiness had rattled the chains of those demons. My task was not to take his demons as my truth, but to see the suffering that created them, and to resolve to never let my own unhealed pain become a verbal weapon against someone else. Here is an original story about harsh speech. In a coastal town, there was a lighthouse keeper named Elian, known for his skill but also for a tongue as sharp and relentless as the rocks his light guarded against. He berated supply boat crews for being minutes late, shouted at gulls for nesting too close, and his reports to the mainland were scathing critiques of everything from the weather to the quality of his lamp oil. The lighthouse was impeccably maintained, but its atmosphere was icy. One fierce winter, a great storm severed the communication cable and damaged the lamp mechanism. Elian was alone, in the dark, with a failing light. A young fisherwoman, Leah, seeing the erratic beam from the village, guessed the trouble. Against all advice, she launched her small boat into the monstrous waves, guided only by her knowledge of the sea and the occasional, frighteningly dim flash. She reached the rock, half drowned, clutching a satchel of tools and spare parts. As she stumbled into the tower, shaking with cold and fear, Elian, in his own panic, did not see her courage. He saw a dripping, shivering girl. His first words were, "You fool! You'll drown us both. What can you possibly do?" The harshness was a wall. Leah looked at him, not at his words, but at the terror in his eyes, the terror of a man responsible for hundreds of lives, now helpless. She did not flinch. She said, softly, over the howl of the wind, "I can be here. And I have tools. Show me the broken heart of the light." Her words were not harsh. They were an anchor. They bypassed the storm of his speech and spoke to the shared purpose beneath. Stunned, Elian pointed. For hours, they worked in silent, desperate partnership. Her hands, small and sure, found the fault he had missed in his anger. As the first hint of dawn grayed the sky, the lamp flared back to full, steady power. As they watched the beam cut through the retreating storm, Elian, without looking at her, spoke again. His voice was raw, stripped of its edge. The light, it almost went out. I thank you. It was not an eloquent apology. It was the first stone removed from the wall. Leah simply nodded. The light is steady now, she said. It needed more than one hand to hold its heart together. From that day, Elian's speech changed. It never became warm, but the harshness was gone, replaced by a gruff, direct clarity. He had learned that in the true storm, harsh words are a liability. They are noise that drowns out the signals of cooperation and compassion. The lighthouse's beam warned ships of physical rocks. Lee's gentle response had warned Elian of the rocks within his own speech. The Buddha's teaching to avoid harsh speech is that repair. It is choosing, in the storm of our own anger or fear, to be the steady beam, not the crashing wave against the rock. From the deliberate violence of harsh speech, we turn to a deception that is often more subtle but equally damaging. It is the speech that paints over reality. It is the forgery of truth. The Buddha named this first in many lists for a reason: false speech or lying. We often trivialize lying. We categorize it: white lies, black lies, omissions, exaggerations. Buddhism cuts through this taxonomy and goes to the root, an intention to mislead for personal gain, to avoid discomfort, or to create a false impression. When we lie, we are not just altering facts, we are actively dismantling the shared ground of reality upon which relationships stand. Trust is not a feeling, it is the confidence that the map of the world the other person is giving you corresponds, to the best of their ability, with the actual territory. A lie is a deliberate distortion of that map. If I tell you a path is safe when I know there is a pit, I have betrayed your steps. If I pretend a well is dry to hoard its water, I have betrayed your thirst. The karma of lying, according to these ancient teachings, is one of profound disorientation. First, we disorient others. But more insidiously, we disorient ourselves. To maintain a lie, we must construct a parallel world in our own mind. We must remember what we said, to whom, and then weave new falsehoods to support the old. Our mental energy, which could be used for clarity and creativity, is spent on maintaining a fiction. We become a divided house, living in the tension between what is and what we have said. Furthermore, we seed our world with uncertainty. If I discover you have lied to me about one thing, how can I be sure of anything else you say? The entire landscape of our relationship becomes suspect, shrouded in a fog of maybe. I learned this not from a grand betrayal, but from a small, childhood incident. I had a prized possession, a smooth, green stone given to me by my grandfather. A friend admired it deeply, with a longing that filled his eyes. Fearing he might ask for it, and not wanting to seem selfish by saying no, I preemptively said, "It's not really that special. My grandfather just picked it up from a driveway. I think it's just painted glass." I saw the light in his eyes dim. The stone became ordinary in his sight because my words had painted it so. Later, he found a similar-looking piece of green glass and brought it to me, smiling. "Look. Now you can have a pair." His generosity, based on my false devaluation, stabbed me with shame. I had lied to protect my attachment, and in doing so, I had robbed him of the joy of admiring a true treasure, and I had robbed myself of the integrity to honor both my grandfather's gift and my friend's genuine appreciation. The stone felt colder in my pocket after that. Its truth was now a secret I kept from someone who cared, all because of my own small, fearful falsehood. The Buddha's injunction against lying is an invitation to have the courage of that truth, even when it feels uncomfortable. It is the understanding that a relationship built on the solid, if sometimes uneven, ground of reality is infinitely more secure and peaceful than a palace built on the shifting sands of fabrication. Let us delve into another original parable from the monk's temple tradition. In a kingdom where merchants thrived, there were two rival silk sellers. Eris was flamboyant, his shop loud with promises. "This silk," he would proclaim, "is woven by moonbeams. It will never fade, never tear, and wear it, and you will dream prophetic dreams." His silks were good, but they were just silk. Yet, people bought for the story. Jiro, his rival, was quiet. When asked about his silk, he would simply say, "It is strong. It is dyed with madder root and indigo. It will soften with time." One season, the queen announced a contest. She sought a robe for a great ceremony, one that must be magnificent but also true. Both merchants set to work. Eris, desperate to win, acquired a fabulous, iridescent silk from a distant land. When asked, he swore it was his own family's secret weave, passed down for generations. He created an elaborate, false history for the fabric. Jiro worked with his local weavers, creating a pattern of stunning complexity, but using only the honest materials he always had. The day came. Eris's robe was dazzling, a spectacle of light. The queen admired it. Then she asked, "Tell me of its making." Eris launched into his fabricated epic. The queen listened, then asked a single, precise question about a detail in his story, a detail about a dye plant he claimed was used, which did not grow in the region he named. Eris faltered. He embellished. He contradicted himself. The splendor of the robe began to dim under the spotlight of his own false words. He was not caught by a spy. He was caught by the internal inconsistency of his lie. The fabric of his story unraveled. Jiro was then summoned. His robe was less flashy but profoundly beautiful, its beauty and its integrity of pattern and color. The queen asked, "And this?" Jiro said, "The silk is from our local worms. The blue is from our indigo vats, soaked for 40 days. The red is from madder root harvested after the first frost. The pattern is the river of time, for the silk will flow and change with you, but its essence will remain." His speech was a plain description of truth. It had no need for embellishment. The truth itself was the ornament. The queen chose Jiro's robe. She said, "I sought a robe for a ceremony of state. The state must be built on what is true, not on what is merely dazzling. A king who wears a lie soon finds his kingdom clothed in falsehood." Eris did not lose because his silk was worse. He lost because his words had painted a world that did not exist. His speech had divorced itself from the reality of the cloth. In Buddhism, truthfulness, Sacca, is a paramitha, a perfection. It is not moralistic, it is practical. It is the alignment of word and reality, which creates a life of astonishing coherence, simplicity, and trustworthiness. You become a person others can navigate by, like a reliable star in the night sky of a confusing world. We have now walked through 4 clearings in this forest: the splitting lightning of divisive speech, the eroding drip of idle chatter, the violent blow of harsh speech, and the painted illusion of false speech. But the Buddha's teaching on right speech is not merely a list of prohibitions. It is the positive cultivation of their opposites. It is an art form. So, let us spend the majority of our time together not just understanding the shadows, but learning to paint with the light. Let us explore, through more original stories and reflections, what wholesome speech looks like, feels like, and creates. The speech of unity. As the antidote to divisiveness, we cultivate speech that connects, heals, and reconciles. This is speech that looks for common ground, that reminds people of their shared humanity, like the grandmother at the spring. It is the word that acts as a bridge. I knew a man, a manager in a factory fraught with tension between the day and night shifts. Each blamed the other for problems, for messes left, for machinery failures. The manager didn't take sides. He called a meeting not of shift leaders, but of the oldest member of the day shift and the oldest member of the night shift. He gave them one task: to co-write a single, one-page story of the factory's best day. Not a report. A story. With characters. They had to interview people from both shifts. Grudgingly, they began. In listening to each other's people, they heard not complaints, but pride in craft, worry about safety, love for the product they made. The story they produced was simple. It described a day when a critical order was completed against all odds because someone on the night shift noticed a flaw and left a detailed, kind note, and the day shift came in and fixed it before the foreman even arrived. The story ended. That day, the factory didn't have 2 shifts. It had one crew, spread across time. The manager had them read it at a full assembly. He used no divisive speech himself. He created a container for a unifying narrative to emerge. That story became lore. It changed the language in the factory. People started saying, the other part of our crew, instead of, the night guys. That is right speech in action, creating conditions for connection to speak itself. The speech of meaningful silence and timely words. The antidote to idle chatter is not utter silence, but mindful speech rooted in value. It is the understanding that words are precious, to be spent like gold coins, not scattered like fallen leaves. It is knowing when to speak and when to listen so deeply that your silence becomes a profound form of communication. I recall visiting a friend who was grieving a terrible loss. I arrived with a head full of condolences, of philosophical perspectives, of things I thought might comfort. I sat with her. She was quiet. I opened my mouth to speak my prepared words, and then I stopped. I saw that my words, however well-intentioned, would be like tapping on the shell of her profound sorrow. They would be an intrusion. So, I said nothing. I made tea. I sat. Hours passed. We sat in the gathering dark. Once, she sighed, a sound that seemed to come from the center of the earth. I simply reached over and placed my hand on hers. She squeezed it. Still, no words. When I left, she hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for not talking." That was the only thing that helped. My silence had been a speech. It had said, "Your grief is too vast for my small words. I will not insult it with chatter. I am here, in its presence with you." That is the highest form of speech born from non-idleness, the speech of compassionate presence. The speech of kind firmness. The antidote to harsh speech is not weakness or avoidance. It is speech that is both compassionate and clear, kind and boundaried. It is the voice that can say, "No," or "This is wrong," without contamination by hatred or contempt. It is the parent who, stopping a child from running into the street, says with firm alarm, "Stop," but then kneels and says with calm urgency, "The street is dangerous. I need you safe." The first word is firm, the second explains the care behind the firmness. There is no character assassination, no, "You foolish child." I worked once with a teacher who was a master of this. A student would submit a poorly reasoned essay. A harsh teacher might scribble, "This is illogical garbage. You didn't think." This teacher would write, "Your thesis here is ambitious. I see you reaching for a big idea." The logic in paragraph 3, however, loses the thread. Look at this sentence and this one. Can you see the leap you're asking the reader to make? Build a bridge here with one more clarifying thought. Try again. I believe you can make this powerful. The criticism was direct, even severe in its clarity, but it was wrapped in respect for the person and belief in their potential. It corrected the work without crushing the worker. That is right speech. It maintains the dignity of all involved. The speech of truthful grace. The antidote to false speech is not brutal, unvarnished honesty that wounds for its own sake. It is truth tempered by timeliness, kindness, and benefit. The Buddha taught that a truth should be true, and helpful, and spoken at the right time. If it is not helpful, even if true, one has the noble silence. This is truth with grace. It is knowing that the naked truth can be blinding, sometimes it needs the clothing of compassion. A doctor diagnosing a serious illness does not blurt out the stark facts without care for the patient's state. She delivers the truth with gravity, with space for questions, with a plan, with hope if possible. The truth is not compromised, but its delivery is mindful of its impact. I think of a gardener telling a child why a picked flower will now die. He doesn't just say, "You killed it." He might say, "See, the flower needed its roots in the earth to drink and live. Now it's a beautiful gift for your mom, but it won't grow anymore. Next time, we can show her the flower living in the garden." The truth of death is there, but so is the truth of beauty, gift, and future care. That is truthful speech that educates and uplifts, rather than merely stating a fact. Now, let us immerse ourselves in a series of longer, original narratives that weave these principles together, stories from the imagined scrolls of Monk's Temple, designed to illuminate the power of right speech in a sustained, narrative form. These will help us fill the quiet hours of contemplation. In a city of high walls, where districts were divided by ancient feuds, there lived a mason named Corin. He was known not for building walls, but for his uncanny skill in repairing them invisibly. When a wall was vandalized with hateful slogans, others would whitewash or rebuild. Corin would study the stones. He would find the original quarries, source stones that matched not just in size but in grain and hue. His repairs were seamless, the wall looked whole, as if the wound had never been. A young revolutionary, fiery with dreams of tearing all walls down, confronted him. "You are part of the problem. You preserve these symbols of separation." Corin did not argue. He invited the youth to walk with him. He showed him a wall he had just finished repairing. "What do you see?" "A wall," spat the youth. "Look closer," Corin said. He pointed to the faint, almost invisible line where his repair began. The original insult here was, "East is thief." I could have replaced the whole section. Instead, I found the exact stone. The wall is whole, but the hateful words are gone. The memory of the division is physically erased. My work is not about preserving walls. It is about erasing the marks of division from them. If I tear the wall down, the hate remains in people's hearts, and they will build a new one. But if I remove the visible scar from the old one, sometimes the heart forgets why it was angry. He took the youth to an older wall, one he had repaired decades prior. Ivy now covered it. Children from both sides played a game, tossing a ball over it, their laughter mingling. "That wall," Corin said softly, "once said, 'Death to Westsiders.' Now it says nothing. It is just a thing to throw a ball over. My speech is in the stones. It is a speech of seamless repair, of making the evidence of hate disappear so that life, over time, can grow over the division." The youth was silent. He had only known the speech of demolition. Corin taught him the more patient, more profound speech of meticulous, loving repair. It was divisive speech's antidote, made manifest in stone and silence. In a village where mornings began with a cacophony of complaints at the communal well, grumbles about husbands, wives, prices, aches, an old woman named Lyra began a practice. She would arrive just before dawn and draw her water in silence. When the first complainer arrived and launched into their daily litany, Lyra would listen, then say not a word of agreement or gossip. Instead, she would ask one question, always a question about something tangible, present, or gently future-oriented. To the woman complaining of her husband's laziness, Lyra said, "The sunrise is painting the clouds peach over the eastern field this morning. Did you see it on your way?" A pause. "No. Look now. It will be gone soon." The woman looked. The beauty momentarily displaced the complaint. To the man groaning about prices, she said, "Your son has a clever hand with willow whistles. I heard him teach young Ben yesterday. That skill is a wealth no market can price." The man blinked, his narrative interrupted. Slowly, over seasons, the well side changed. People still shared burdens, but they began to also share sightings of the first swallow, a recipe that used the abundant mint, a joke a child had told. Lyra never chastised idle chatter. She never said, "Stop complaining." She simply, consistently, wove a single thread of present moment awareness or genuine appreciation into the fabric of their talk. She was a weaver, and her questions were the shuttle, pulling a brighter thread through the drab cloth of habitual grumbling. Without condemning the idle, she cultivated the meaningful. The karma of this was a village that, while still having problems, also had a daily practice of noticing beauty and skill. Their speech became richer, more grounded. Lyra's gentle questions were the antidote to idle chatter, not suppression, but skillful redirection towards the nourishing. Gareth was a blacksmith of few words, but his fists were his primary speech. When angered, which was often, he would strike a wall, a piece of scrap, once, shamefully, an apprentice. His forge was a place of fear. His heart was a furnace of shame. After the incident with the apprentice, who left and never returned, Gareth fell into a deep despair. He went to a hermit who lived in the hills, known for crafting beautiful wind chimes from scrap metal. "I am a monster," Gareth said. "My anger speaks through my hands. I break things. I hurt people." The hermit listened, then handed Gareth a small, perfect hammer, its head polished to a mirror shine. "Your anger is a fire," the hermit said. "A fire can destroy a house or forge a plowshare. Your hands are the tool. This hammer is for you. But you may not strike anything with it for one full cycle of the moon. You must carry it. When the anger comes, you must take it out, look at your face and its head, and speak the anger instead of striking." Gareth thought it foolish but was desperate. The first test came when a customer accused him of a faulty hinge. The old fire roared. His fist clenched. He started to reach for a hammer from his rack, then remembered. He fumbled for the polished hammer. He held it up. In its mirrored surface, he saw his own face, twisted, red, ugly with rage. The sight shocked him. He had never seen himself in anger. The customer was still yelling. Gareth, staring at his own reflection, spoke, his voice strained but clear. "I am so angry right now. I poured a day's work into that hinge. Your words feel like you are throwing my work in the dirt." It was not an accusation. It was a statement of his internal weather. The customer, taken aback by this strange, vulnerable honesty, stopped yelling. "Well, it broke," he said, less forcefully. Still looking at the hammer, at his own face softening slightly in confusion, Gareth said, "Then I will make it again. No charge. And I will watch it myself to see why it failed." The anger had not vanished, but it had been translated. From a destructive force in his fist, it had become a communicated feeling. Over the month, this practice transformed Gareth. He saw his anger in the mirror hammer before he felt it in his muscles. He began to speak its name. "I am frustrated. I feel disrespected." This speech disarmed others. It invited conversation, not combat. By the moon's end, Gareth had not struck a single blow. His forge became known as a place of solid work and surprising calm. He had become the blacksmith of gentle words, using the tool of speech to shape his internal fire into connection, rather than violence. The mirrored hammer became his most treasured tool, the antidote to harsh speech made metal. In a great library that was also a seat of power, there was an archivist named Althea. Her role was to record the proceedings of the ruling council. The counselors were skilled in false speech, promises made to be broken, statistics twisted, histories rewritten to suit the present. Althea recorded everything they said, verbatim, in her neat script. But she also kept a second set of scrolls. This was her personal archive. In it, she recorded not speeches, but facts. The price of bread in the market on the day a new tax was praised as, for the people's good. The number of ships in the harbor the day a trade deal was hailed as unprecedented prosperity. The exact weather the day a war was declared for glorious and necessary causes. She recorded the counselor's own later words when they contradicted their earlier ones. She never showed this archive to anyone. It was her practice of truth. One day, a young, idealistic counselor, realizing the web of lies he was enmeshed in, came to her in despair. "Nothing they say is real. How can I navigate it?" Althea did not offer advice. She simply opened her personal archive to a random page and read aloud, "5th day of the harvest moon." Counselor Vancer proclaimed, "The river defenses are strongest in history. Market price of lumber, doubled. Note, saw no new timber going to the river quarter, only to Vancer's new estate." She turned another page. 3rd day of the frost moon. Counselor Millicent declared, "The peace is secure." Note, her own guard contingent doubled yesterday. She looked at the young man. "The truth does not live in their speeches," she said. "It lives in the price of bread, in the movement of timber, in the size of guards. My archive is my anchor. It reminds me of what is, so I am not swept away by what is said. You do not need to accuse them of lying. You simply need to build your own archive. Anchor your own speech to what your eyes see, your hands touch. Speak that. It will be a small, steady flame in a hall of mirrors." The young counselor began his own practice. He asked simple, factual questions in counsel. If the defenses are strongest, can we see the engineer's report on the new pilings? If peace is secure, why has the guard protocol changed? He did not call anyone a liar. He simply asked for the reality behind the words. Slowly, uncomfortably, the atmosphere began to shift. Some lies became harder to tell. Althea's practice of archiving reality was the antidote to false speech, a relentless, quiet fidelity to what is, which became a foundation for a more truthful public discourse. On a wide, slow river, a ferryman named Oren carried people from one bank to the other. He was a listener. Over years, he developed 2 questions he would ask passengers. The first, as they boarded. What are you leaving behind on that shore? The second, as they disembarked. What do you hope to meet on this one? The questions were simple, but they framed the journey. People unloading heavy burdens would often speak of what they were leaving, a quarrel, a failed venture, a grief. In the speaking, mid-river, with the water flowing beneath, it sometimes felt like the river itself was carrying it away. Those heading towards something would articulate a hope. A reunion, a new start, a challenge. Oren would never give advice. He would sometimes, after they answered, say something like, "The water has heard," or, "The other shore is waiting." His speech was purely facilitative. It created a sacred space for people to hear their own truth, to name their own transition. He was the opposite of idle chatter. His words were the precise keystones that allowed the arch of a personal journey to hold. One day, 2 bitter rivals, men from feuding families, found themselves on his boat together, forced to share the passage. The air was ice. Oren asked his first question to the first man. The man, stiffly, said, "I leave nothing but trouble." he asked the second. The other man, glaring, said, I go to secure my rights. Mid-river, Oren did nothing. He pulled. The silence was thick. Then, unexpectedly, the first man, looking at the water, muttered, almost to himself, I leave my father's stubborn ghost. The second man, startled, glanced at him. After a long minute, he said, I go to face my brother's pride. They had not spoken to each other, but they had, in Oren's container, named the real things. When they disembarked, they did not speak, but the hatred had been diluted by a drop of shared humanity. They had, for a moment, seen the family ghosts, not the enemy. Oren's two questions were the essence of right speech, minimal, intentional, creating a space for truth and transition without imposition. His boat carried bodies, but his speech carried souls from one state of heart to another. In the palace gardens, there was a delicate, rare tree from a far-off land. It began to sicken, its leaves browning. The head gardener tried everything, more water, less water, different fertilizers, spells. Nothing worked. He was ready to cut it down. A junior gardener, Elara, asked to be given one night with the tree. She was known for talking to plants, which others thought whimsy. That evening, she sat by the tree. She did not speak cheerful lies. She did not say, you are beautiful, you are strong. She spoke the truth, softly. I see you are suffering. Your leaves are dry. Your branches feel tired. I don't know what you need from this foreign soil. But I am here. We are both here, in this garden, under this moon. She spoke of the garden's history, of the earthworms she had seen in its soil, of the taste of the local rain. She apologized for the harsh sun of the previous week. It was not flattery or idle talk, it was an acknowledgement of the tree's reality and its struggle. She fell asleep at its roots. At dawn, she was woken by a drop of dew falling from a single, newly unfurled, pale green leaf tip at the very top of the tree. She hadn't cured it. But the tree, in being seen in its truth, not in the expectation of being a perfect specimen, had mustered the will for one new effort. Elara's speech was the antidote to both harshness, which would have been the impatient cutting, and falsehood, which would have been pretending it was fine. It was truthful, kind, present speech. It created a relationship. The tree did not fully recover, but it lived, a testament to the power of words that acknowledge reality with compassion rather than judgment or denial. There was a cartographer named Kale who grew tired of mapping lands. He turned his skill inward, proposing to create maps of human hearts. People laughed. How can you map the intangible? He developed a method. He would listen to a person for days, recording not just their stories, but the words they stressed, the things they avoided, the emotions that colored their speech. Then, he would draw. One map for a grieving widow was not a shape, but a series of concentric circles like a target. At the center, a small, black dot labeled the day it went quiet. The rings around it were labeled with her own phrases. Ring of why, ring of empty chairs, ring of his favorite song, ring of the future that vanished. When she saw it, she wept. It's true, she said. That is exactly what it feels like. The pain is the center, and everything else circles it. For a boastful merchant, The map was a precarious tower of boxes, each labeled with a claim he made: wealth, respect, power. The lines connecting them were shaky, and at the base, the foundation was a tiny, almost invisible box labeled, Father's Approval. The merchant was furious, then silent, then thoughtful. Cale's maps were a form of speech. They were the visual manifestation of the truths hidden in people's own words. They were neither harsh nor falsely comforting. They were mirrors of architecture. People would look at their heart map and understand their own inner landscape better. They could see where the swamps of sadness were, where the fortified walls of pride stood, where the bridges of connection might be built. Cale's work was the ultimate practice of right listening and right speech combined. He listened to the wholesomeness and unwholesomeness in their speech, and he reflected it back in a new, clarifying form. His maps did not tell people what to do, they showed them where they were. And in any journey, knowing where you are is the first, most crucial step. He was a healer whose tool was truthful, compassionate representation. In a town plagued by noise, street vendors, town criers, gossipmongers, preachers, the old bell ringer of the central tower performed one simple act. At the exact stroke of noon, he would ring the great bell not in a frantic peal, but a single, deep, resonant bong that hung in the air for a full minute. He had purified the bell's strike so it was one clear tone. That single note had a peculiar effect. In its vibration, the other noises would often, just for a few seconds, hush. The chatter would stop. People would look up. They would take a breath they didn't know they were holding. It was a punctuation mark in the run-on sentence of the day. A little girl, confused by the constant arguing in her home, asked the bell ringer why he didn't ring more. "Child," he said, "the world is full of many words, most of them saying very little. My task is not to add to the noise. My task is to, once a day, create a space in the noise. A space just wide enough for one clear thought, or one deep breath, or one moment of remembering the sky. That single note is my speech. It says, here is a space. What will you fill it with?" The girl understood. She began a practice. Whenever she felt overwhelmed by the harsh or idle words at home, she would imagine the single bong. In her mind, it would create a silent, golden space. In that space, she would not react with more noise. She would simply breathe. Sometimes, she would then speak one true, kind thing. "Mother, your hands look tired. Can I help?" That single, mindful note, reverberating inwardly, became her antidote to the unwholesome speech around her. It taught her that right speech often begins with the courage to create an inner silence, a space where a wholesome word can be born. We have been walking for a long time now. Through stories of lightning-split trees and seamless repairs, of chattering trains and dawn questions, of harsh blacksmiths and mirrored hammers, of false silks and true archives, of fairy men and heart mapmakers and single bell notes. These are all facets of the same jewel, the Buddha's profound teaching on right speech, or the avoidance of the four unwholesome speeches. Let us now integrate this understanding on the level of daily life, of karma, and of the heart's deepest intention. The Buddha said our words create karma. Karma is not fate, it is cause and effect. It is the ethical physics of the universe. Every word is a seed. A seed of discord, of noise, of violence, of illusion. Or a seed of unity, of meaning, of kindness, of truth. The soil in which it grows is the mind of the listener and the world you co-create. But the most immediate soil is your own mind. When you speak divisively, you water the weeds of separation in your own consciousness. When you chatter idly, you clutter your own mental attic. When you speak harshly, you burn your own peace. When you speak falsely, you lose your own bearings. The first casualty of unwholesome speech is the speaker's own inner peace and clarity. Therefore, the practice begins with mindfulness, sati. Before you speak, pause. In that sacred pause, ask yourself the questions the Buddha implied. 1. Is what I am about to say true? Guarding against false speech. 2. Is it helpful? Guarding against idle and harsh speech. 3. Is it kind? Guarding against harsh and divisive speech. 4. Is it the right time? The wisdom of timely silence or speech. This pause is your greatest power. It is the space between the lightning flash of impulse and the thunder of spoken word. In that space, you have the freedom to choose. Do not be discouraged by failure. This is a lifelong practice. You will sometimes gossip. You will sometimes snap. You will sometimes embellish. You will sometimes fill silence with nervous noise. The practice is not to be perfect. The practice is to notice. To notice with gentle, non-harsh awareness, that was divisive. That was a bit idle. Without self-flagellation, simply note it. That very noting is wisdom arising. It is the beginning of change. Resolve to do better next time. Each mindful word is a step on the path. Remember, speech is not just about content. It is about energy. It is about the music beneath the lyrics. A truthful statement can be sung with the melody of compassion or the screech of contempt. Pay attention to your tone, your body, the energy you emit. Is it open or closed? Warm or cold? Inviting or repelling? This is the unspoken speech, and it is often heard louder than the words. Finally, cultivate the positive. Don't just try to not lie. Actively look for truths worth sharing, stories of generosity, observations of beauty, expressions of gratitude. Don't just not gossip. Actively speak words that build people up in their absence. Don't just not be harsh. Practice giving clear, necessary feedback wrapped in respect. Don't just avoid idle chatter. Practice deep, generous listening, which is the highest form of speech's counterpart. Your words are your legacy. They ripple out long after the sound waves have died. They live in the memory of the listener, in the atmosphere of your home, in the culture of your workplace. They are the threads with which you weave the tapestry of your relational world. Will it be a tapestry of thorns or of flowers? Of murky confusion or of clear, beautiful pattern? The choice, moment by moment, breath by breath, is yours. As we draw our long walk to a close, let us end with one final, original contemplation from Monk's Temple. Imagine your life as a vast, silent lake at dawn. Mist hangs over its surface. Each word you have ever spoken is a pebble that was dropped into this lake at some point in the past. The unwholesome speeches, the lies, the divisive words, the harsh cuts, the idle gravel, these pebbles are jagged, dark. They sank quickly, but the ripples they sent out crossed the entire lake, disturbing the mist, colliding with other ripples, creating a chaotic interference pattern. Some of those ripples still bounce off the shores of your present, echoes of old conflicts, regrets, misunderstandings. The wholesome speeches, the truths spoken with care, the words of healing, the kind firmness, the meaningful silences, these pebbles are smooth, clear, perhaps like quartz. They too sent ripples. But their ripples were clean, expansive. They traveled out and harmonized. They carried clarity, not chaos. Now, you stand at the shore of this lake, here, in this present moment. The mist is beginning to thin with the rising sun of awareness. In your hand, you hold the next pebble. You are about to speak. You can feel its texture. Is it jagged or smooth? Dark or clear? You have the choice. You always have the choice in this eternal now. Drop the wholesome pebble. Watch its ripples go out, clean and wide. See how they meet the old, chaotic ripples from the past and, gradually, gently, begin to cancel them out, to smooth the water. With each wholesome word, you are not just speaking to the present, you are healing the past and calming the future of your lake. You are bringing peace to your own waters. This is the power you hold. This is the sacred responsibility and the glorious opportunity of human speech. Thank you for walking this long path with me today at Monk's Temple. May the awareness of your words be a gentle light in your life. May you speak from a place of peace, and may your speech be a cause of peace for all who hear it. May you be well. May you be happy. May you live and speak in peace. Good night.